I'm going to walk through the Brent EX Pottery wheel because I know how easy it is to feel stuck between it looks great on the shelf and maybe this isn't the right size or power for my home studio. A lot of people I've talked to worry about buying a wheel that either takes up too much space, makes too much noise, or just feels like a toy when they try to throw a real bowl. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In the next few minutes I'll lay out what the wheel actually does in a typical weekend warrior setup, where the value really shows up, and who should walk away before spending $100. First off, let's talk about space. The Brent EX is marketed as a small wheel, and that's not just marketing speak. The base measures roughly a foot across and the overall height stays under 4 feet, which means it slides onto a standard kitchen table or a compact studio bench without turning the room into a permanent pottery corner. I measured it in my own garage where I keep a workbench for woodworking, and the wheel sits comfortably with room to spare for a slab roller. If you're living in an apartment or have a dedicated corner in a basement, that footprint is a real advantage. The downside is that the smaller footprint also limits the size of the wheel head you can comfortably work with. Larger bowls or plates will push the edge of the wheel and make it harder to keep even pressure. For a beginner or someone who plans to make mugs, teacups, and small decorative pieces, that trade-off is usually worth it, but a serious thrower looking for 12-inch throws might feel constrained. Power is the next big question. The EX runs on a standard 120-volt outlet and pulls about 250 watts at full speed. In practice, that means you can get the wheel up to a decent 120 revolutions per minute for stoneware or a slower 80 revolutions per minute for delicate porcelain. I tried it with a slab of earthenware that was already a few days dry, and the motor kept a steady pace without any stutter when I increased the speed. The classic controller with a single knob feels familiar if you've ever used a kitchen mixer. You turn it to speed up, turn it back to slow down, and there's a separate reversing switch that lets you spin the wheel clockwise or counterclockwise. The reversing switch is handy when you want to clean the head without turning the whole motor off, but the knob doesn't have the tactile click stops you see on higher-end wheels, so you have to watch the RPM gauge on the wall or use a timer to make sure you're staying in the sweet spot. For most hobbyists that's fine, but if you need pinpoint speed control for very thin porcelain, you might spend a little extra time dialing in the right setting. Noise is something I hear a lot in the comments on any beginner wheel, and the Brent EX is surprisingly quiet for a motor of its size. I ran it while my roommate was on a video call, and the sound stayed under a typical kitchen blender level. The splash pan, which comes included, helps dampen the splatter and also adds a little extra mass to the base, cutting down on vibration. The pan is shallow enough to catch runoff but deep enough that you can pour a bucket of water for a quick soap without spilling onto the floor. One thing to note, the splash pan is plastic, so if you're working with a lot of slip or glaze that dries fast, you'll need to wipe it often to keep it from becoming a sticky mess. It's not a deal breaker, just an extra step in cleanup. Now let's look at the practical strengths that matter after the purchase. The biggest win for me was the 10-year warranty. That's a signal the manufacturer is confident the motor and the controller won't quit on you after a few semesters of night class use. I've seen wheels with 3-year warranties that start whining after a year, and that can be a costly repair. With the Brent EX, you can feel a little more comfortable pushing it a few hours a week without worrying about a sudden failure. Another strength is the included 70 milliliters of free glaze. It's a modest amount, but for someone just starting out, it lets you test the wheel's feel with an actual glaze finish without having to buy a separate bottle. I mixed a small batch of a transparent glaze and threw a few practice cups. The glaze applied evenly, and I could see how the wheel's speed affected the glaze flow on the side of the pot. It's not a substitute for a full glaze line, but it's a thoughtful addition that shows Brent understands a starter's workflow. The classic controller is also a plus if you're transitioning from a manual wheel to an electric one. There's no digital readout to stare at, just the tactile feel of turning a knob. That simplicity reduces